Hi, this is Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz coming at you live from the Golan for Israel 365 News. I should warn you in advance, if you hear any background craziness, that's because we're the day before Purim and people are out in the streets doing some crazy stuff. Lots of music, fireworks. That's what we do here. I'm here to give you a news roundup. We'll be doing this 2 times a week. The most amazing story came across my desk this morning. The Pope Francis, is going to become the first Pope to go to Iraq, to visit Iraq. And he's going to be holding a special interreligious prayer service. And the place he's going to be holding it is by a ziggurat, which is like a pyramid. And that was built by the Mesopotamians in the 21st century BCE. And the prayer service is going to be called the Prayer for the Sons and Daughters of Abraham. Now, the really horrifying thing about this, unfortunately, is he's holding this to unite the sons and daughters of Abraham. However, noticeably absent from the sons and daughters of Abraham are the Jews. He's inviting Arab Christians. He's going to be inviting Muslims, the Mandaean Sabian, the Yazidis, and other minorities present in Iraq. But there are no Jews in Iraq. There will be no Jews at the birthplace. This is supposed to be the birthplace of Abraham. The ziggurat is where they believe Ur of Chaldees, the Chaldean Ur, the city was located. It was an ancient site. This is one of those stories that the more I dug, the more I looked at it, the worse it got. This particular ziggurat that the Pope chose to have his Abraham, son of Abraham, prayer service at, this ziggurat was originally used by the Mesopotamians for human sacrifice. It was built as a religious site, much like other pyramids, and they did human sacrifice there. And this is the place that the Pope has decided to pray. So it gets even better. Okay, I want to point out one of the reasons why the Jews are not there. The Jews were in Iraq for 2,500 years. We especially know this today because the Pope is showing up directly after the holiday of Purim, which took place in Iraq. It took place in the city of Shushan, which is in modern-day Iraq. If you go to Iraq, you can visit the tomb of Mordechai and Esther. There's also the tomb of Nahum is there, and the tomb of the tomb of Zechariah, I believe. And that, however, was turned into a mosque. So the Jews have always been there. There's been periodic times of anti-Semitism, of pogroms, but for 2,500 years, the Jews were there. And then as soon as Israel was established, things got so bad that in the 1950s, in the early 1950s, Israel ran 2 operations and took out all of the 120,000 Jews, Iraqi Jews, via Iran and Cyprus. At that time, we were on good relations with Iran, and after that operation, there were only 5,000 Jews there. And now, in 2020, it was reported that there were 4 Jews still in Iraq. So I think it's very telling that the Pope is having a Sons of Abraham reunion prayer, and the Jews are not invited. At a site that was used for idolatry and human sacrifice. And this is actually not so surprising, as shocking as it may be. It's not surprising because the Pope has been working to connect with Islam for a very long time. He had what he called the fraternity, the fraternity the document on human fraternity for world peace and living together. He signed it with Sheikh Ahmed El Taib in 2019. And it was basically saying that there's one religion. We're all the same religion. And he signed that with the Muslims. And a lot of Catholics were not happy about it, and a lot of Muslims were not happy about it. So Pope Francis has been working to bring together Muslims and Christian and Catholics for a very long time. He did this also. He's very pro-Palestinian. He's also pro-Iranian. He hosted Iranian President Hassan Rouhani at the Vatican in 2016. So he's very pro-Iranian, very pro-Palestinian, very pro-Islam. It's very strange. But there is an end of days angle to this that makes it not so surprising. The end of days angle is, we know there's a verse, Genesis 28:9, where Esav, he went to Ishmael and he married a daughter of Ishmael. And her name was Mahalat, which literally means a disease, which is interesting. It's coming during the time of the pandemic. So Esav married Mahalat, the daughter of Ishmael. So this is the coming together, pardon me, in the Bible of Esav and Ishmael. And we know that in the end of days, everything that happened in the Bible is going to come back on itself. So this union of Esav and Ishmael is supposed to come back in the end of days. And the Ishmael and Esav will join together again in the war of Gog and Magog to seek the destruction of Jacob, to seek the destruction of the Jewish people. And that will be the culmination of history. It's also interesting to note that we see that we're coming up on the month of Nisan. We have Purim, and a month after Purim, we have Pesach, Passover. Purim is in the month of Adar. Pesach is in the month of Nisan. and what happens is, we know that Daniel had his vision described in chapter 10 on the 24th of the month of Nisan. The anniversary, as it were, of Daniel's vision is coming up right after the Pope goes to Iraq. And and we see that this end of days, this vision of Daniel took place by the river Tigris in Mesopotamia, where the Pope is going to be. And in his vision, Daniel saw a man dressed in linen, his loins girt in fine gold. And this to me does sound very much like what the Pope dresses. And the sound of his speech was like the noise of a multitude. And in Daniel chapter 10, verse 20 says, "Do you know why I have come to you? Now I must come back to fight the prince of Persia." Persia is Iran. "When I go off, the prince of Greece will come in." The prince of Greece. Greece became the West, became also Greece and Rome were the beginning of the church. They were idolatry and they became the church, the Vatican. So this is where we see the Pope going to the ziggurat, a place of human sacrifice and idolatry in Iraq, excluding Jacob from the blessings of his father, as it were, stealing back the blessings. Esav stealing back the blessings that went to Jacob. And that's what he's doing this week. So, Josh, did you want to add something? Josh is in Jerusalem. He's mobile right now, so it's a little hard. But Josh has a very different approach to prophecy, so I very much appreciate all of his input.
We're good. We're just keeping the signal going.
Okay, you're just keeping the signal going. Okay. So this is what we see, that we see the Pope going to Iraq to a ziggurat where they did idolatry and human sacrifice. And there he will have a prayer for the sons of Jacob, which includes Ishmael, it includes Esau, but it excludes Jacob. And that's going down this week. And it's going down under everyone's eyes and no one sees it. That's the crazy thing. Also, we're all aware that there's a new president in the White House, Joe Biden. And Joe Biden has a very interesting approach. We knew that Donald Trump was very, very good for Israel. I live in the Golan. Right near me, we have the Trump Heights, because we named it in his honor because he was so great to Israel. But Israel is a litmus test. It's not, if you bless us, we bless you. We don't choose to bless people. If you bless us, we have to bless you. And Joe Biden is choosing not to bless us. And as a result, he's bringing a lot of hard things into the world. One of the things he did is he decided, one of the last things Mike Pompeo did in office was he declared the Houthis a terrorist organization. The Houthis are in Yemen. They're running a civil war that has created a horrible humanitarian crisis there. They have a lot of drones and a lot of missiles, and they are fighting their war with that. And they also are using the drones and missiles against Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia is trying to prop up the government of Yemen, and the Houthis are trying to bring down the government in Yemen. And the reason why the Houthis are hanging in there is they are being funded and totally backed, also being given weapons by Iran. This is a proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which is a war of faith. Iran is, as we know, Shia, and they are not Arab. And Saudi Arabia is, as its name implies, Arab, and they are Sunni. And not only are they Sunni, they are the head of the Sunni world, because they have Mecca, the holiest site in Islam, and the Kaaba there in Saudi Arabia, and they are the head of the Sunni world. As such, Iran hates them. And Joe Biden did a couple things. One is he decided that he was going to stop. He was going to restart the Iran deal. And the Iran nuclear deal, the bulk of it, if you read it, actually has to do with economy and business. Iran was suffering financially from these economic sanctions, and if they didn't have money, they weren't able to carry out their real desire, which was regional expansionism, terrorism, and bad stuff. So as soon as Biden got in, he took away the economic sanctions, which President Trump had put in place, and that enabled them to start backing the Houthis. They took away they uncategorized the Houthis. They are no longer considered a terrorist organization, though they act like one. And he decided to stop funding the Saudi effort against the Houthis. The Saudis also fight Al-Qaeda, so that's opening up America to some bad stuff. Now, this is all true politically, but I like to think that the politics are actually driven by the spiritual basis of where people come from. And backing a war in Yemen actually has a biblical basis. I spoke to a brilliant man named Dov Bar-Leib, and he pointed out, based on the prayers that we pray on Rosh Hashanah, he said that there's a verse in Zechariah, or as you say, Zechariah, chapter 9, verse 14. and Hashem will manifest himself to them, and his arrows shall flash like lightning. My Hashem shall sound the shofar and advance in a stormy tempest. Now, if you look at that verse in Hebrew, the words for stormy tempest are, actually, let me read the whole verse to you in Hebrew. V'Hashem alehem yira'eh v'yatza kevarak chatzov Adonai Hashem b'shofar yitka'u v'halach b'sa'arot teman. Sa'arot teman is a stormy tempest. Sa'arot but teman actually is the word for Yemen in Hebrew. So it also means it also means stormy, but it also means Yemen. And from the arrows flashing out of here we see that Zechariah is actually prophesizing about Gog and Magog. And from this we learn that one of at least the possibilities, if not probability or necessity, that Gog and Magog will actually begin in Yemen. So we were going through a period where Yemen was actually it was a humanitarian crisis, but by opening up the Iranian sources, by funding Iran, and by opening up by strengthening the Houthis, Biden is actually opening up the possibility for this war. He's siding with Gog and Magog to begin a war in Yemen, and that we saw happening this week also. Joe Biden opening up Iran, opening up the Houthis, opening up the war in Yemen, which will be the precursor to Gog and Magog. If you have any, I'm sorry, there are questions. Okay, John Kenneth Stava, this is funny. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Okay, yeah, Jamie. I kind of, something. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I mean, when, like, for example, the story with the Pope, when so many things are right in front of your eyes, and the ziggurat, of course, was a place of idolatry, and for a Pope to go to a place of idolatry and human sacrifice is a bit extreme, and no one noticed. No one even commented. All of there are dozens of stories about it, and no one commented that an Abraham prayer would not include any Jews. I think that's kind of shocking. Cisco Davila, hi. Yeah, pray for you in America. I'll be more than happy to do that. All you have to do is bless me, and I'll bless you right back. It's a blessing that comes from Israel. What I should say is that when Trump was opening up the valves and pouring bounty down onto Israel, acting like King Cyrus, and paving the way for the final redemption, I felt very beholden to America, that you were doing so much for us. And I'm American, but Israel's America's closest ally, I think, not just because you help us, but because there's a spiritual bond there. Oh, okay. A remark to Josh. Okay. But there is a spiritual bond between America and Israel. And I feel like when Israel goes through hard times, you have our back. And when America is going through hard times, we have your back, even if it's just through prayer. But never underestimate that prayer. It'll come back and get you. We were talking about Joe Biden and his Iranian connection. I want to read to you. We have a midrash which is 800 years old, and the midrash actually it was written 800 years ago, and this is what it says. Rabbi Yitzchak said, in the year that the Messiah will be revealed, All the later leaders of the nations will provoke each other. The king of Persia will provoke the king of Arabia. Persia, I would like to remind you, is Iran. Okay, the king of Arabia, Saudi Arabia. The leader of Iran is going to provoke the king of Saudi Arabia. And the king of Saudi Arabia, the king of Arabia, will go to Edom. Edom can, a lot of end of days interpreters, people who try to understand prophecy, identify one of the possibilities of Edom being America, representative because it's the strongest nation of the West, and Edom became the West. So the king of Arabia will go to America, to Edom, to receive advice from them. And the king of Persia, Iran, will go and destroy the entire world. And all the nations of the world will shake in panic and fall on their faces and feel contractions like those of giving birth. We frequently compare the arrival of the Messiah to giving birth. And Israel will shake in panic and ask, where will we go? And God will sway to them and say, my children, do not fear, because everything I did for you. Why are you afraid? Don't be afraid. The time has come for your redemption. So we can learn a couple things from this. Iran, Persia is a major player. As I said, they're not Arab. They are Muslim, but they're not Arab. So it's kind of natural for them to fight against the Arabs, represented, of course, by Saudi Arabia. And it's also, I'm not sure how we would classify Persia. And the Jews spent a lot of time in Persia, as we see from Purim. So the fact that Arabia, Ishmael, goes to Edom, which is Esav, we saw that there's a connection. That there's a connection in the Bible between Esav and Edom, Esav and Ishmael, through marriage of Mahalat. And that's going to return in the end of days. But in the end, they're also going to fight against each other. And that will be the Gog and Magog. There's a lot of ways that could happen. I don't want to pretend so that there's only one way and say that I know it. But we have this midrash that was written down 800 years ago and has sources going back much further. That there is going to be a war between Arabia and Persia. Persia being, of course, Iran, and that it is going to involve America. And what's crazy is this was absolutely not a possibility 100 years ago. And it is now a possibility, probability. So those are the foreign policy. We call it Geula, meaning redemption stories that are coming. I also want to. This always freaks me out when I see this. Okay, Biden is now reattaching himself to the Palestinians. And the Palestinians, to be really honest, I use that word, but it's actually not a really good term. And I'll tell you why. First of all, they're not a nation. There may be people who identify as a Palestinian, but there never has been. Palestine was a made-up expression applied to Israel. But after the Romans took us out, it literally means in Hebrew, polshim, people who take over, who intrude in. It is not. It was never meant the Plishtim. That's the Plishtim. We're not really sure who they were. They were just the Plishtim. They were people who came into Israel and caused a lot of trouble from somewhere else. And I think that's kind of who we have now. But the point being, it gets very difficult even when you talk to people who are pro-Palestinian, because they have trouble. Why? Because they know who the Palestinians are. The Palestinians are the people the Arabs in Gaza, Judea, and Samaria. Except that doesn't include the Arabs who are Bedouin and Druzi. Druzi are not really Arabs. And then the problem becomes, what happens if these very same people go into Israel? Are they still Palestinians, or are they Israeli Arabs? If they stop, and that's a big problem. Also, as we know, UNRWA, they define UNRWA was established in 1950 to help the Palestinian refugees, and the Palestinians are the only ones whose refugee status is multi-generational. It never stops. It actually increases, which is why there are reports now of 5 million Palestinians. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. There are less than 20,000 actual Palestinian refugees who fled Israel after 1948 and after 1967. So using the term Palestinians is difficult. But even worse is when you use that term to try to set up a country. Okay? And the problem with that is because God gave us the borders of Israel. God actually established 70 nations after Noah, but he very clearly established the land of Israel belonging to the Jews in the Bible. Now, every time I read about this, it blows my mind. We know that last week, Biden came into office a month ago, and he's already reopening the Palestinian Liberation Organization mission in Washington, which is a whole other story unto itself. He's already reestablishing the two-state solution agenda, which is a problem. Because, first of all, this is biblical Israel. You cannot split up Israel. That's forbidden in the Torah. In addition, we've learned through the Abraham Accords that the only reason why we have not had peace in the Middle East is because of the Palestinians. As soon as you take the Palestinians, and I give Donald Trump a lot of credit, he's a businessman. He wants to make a deal. He doesn't care what the deal was yesterday. If he needs to make a deal today, he'll make it. Pardon me. So he went in. Everyone says, oh, deal with the Palestinians. He's like, why? Never worked. So we now have the Abraham Accords, and the other countries are falling over themselves, jumping in line to make peace with Israel, to normalize relations. And not just peace, they want full normalized relations. The Palestinians are not the key to the Middle East. They're the obstacle. And yet, he's going right back to it. And why is he going back to it? I think it's because he is anti-Bible. And the Bible says that Israel belongs to the Jews. That being said, what happens to people who go against the Bible? The Bible says the land of Israel, promised to the offspring of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, can't split it up, belongs to God. You can't give it away. We are actually, the Jews are the slaves of God. God took us out of slavery in Egypt, but he didn't totally set us free. We belong to him. And a slave, according to Jewish law, cannot own his own property. Everything he owns belongs to his master. So God gave us the land to take care of, and we have a purpose to do with it. But since it's not ours to give away, it's certainly not Biden's to give away. And it certainly does not belong to the Palestinians or the Arabs. And the other Arab nations are very aware of that. And they're willing to say it, just not out loud too loudly. But what happens to people who give away or try to get Israel to give away parts of Israel? Well, if we go back to 1938, Lord Neville Chamberlain actually met with Adolf Hitler in 1938, signing the Munich Agreement to stop Nazi expansionism. And as soon as he did that, literally days later, one of the most destructive and powerful hurricanes in recorded history hit Long Island and southern New England. It was a huge, huge storm. And that's what happens when you do something that's not good for the Jews. He opened the way for Nazi Germany, and that brought, and right after that, a massive storm hit the East Coast. You have a lot of cases of that. In October 1991, George Bush Sr., he's opened the Madrid Conference, and he had an expectation that Israel would trade land for peace. And as the conference was taking place, while they were sitting down talking about how they could get Israel to trade land for peace, there was a storm developing over the North Atlantic that became what they called the perfect storm. It created the largest ever waves recorded in that region. It was a crazy storm because it went from east to west, which normally storms in that region from the North Atlantic go west to east. And one day later, the storm hit New England. And that's kind of ironic. It hit the New England coast with 35-foot waves. And it extensively damaged George Bush's personal home. So while he was in Madrid trying to get Israel to give up land in Israel, his home was destroyed by a storm. So what are you going to say to that? 1992, they did another Madrid conference, and they tried to do the same thing. And one day after the conference, Hurricane Andrew, the worst natural disaster recorded in America's history, hit Florida. It left 180,000 people homeless. Okay, 1994, Clinton, he met with Syria's President al-Assad in Geneva. They talked about Israel giving up the Golan Heights. And within 24 hours, there was an earthquake in Northridge that hit Southern California, 6.9 on the Richter scale. Killed 57 people, estimated $20 billion damage. There's a whole long thing. Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres signed the Oslo Accords in 1995. There was a rabbi who I'm personal friends with, Rav Yosef Dayan. He led a group of rabbis in what's called the Polsa de Nora against Yitzhak Rabin. And a few months later, Rabin was assassinated by Yigal Amir. 1998, Netanyahu met with President Bill Clinton at the White House. And it was not a nice meeting. And Clinton was trying to get Clinton and Madeleine Albright, Secretary of State, refused to have lunch with Netanyahu. And if you don't know, January 21st, 1998, when they were doing this to Netanyahu, a young woman came forward. Her name was Monica Lewinsky. And that gave a big bang to Clinton. There's a whole long list of, it's shocking to me. I have a list of about 20 events, maybe more. Yeah, definitely more, of natural catastrophes and earthquakes, scandals, the stock market crashing. All these things happen when America tries to pressure Israel into giving up land. And so that's why it pains me to say that we just had Joe Biden. He's moving forward for a two-state solution. And immediately, a large chunk of America got hit by a polar vortex, which is a very unusual thing. Thousands of low temperature records were set. We know what happened to Texas. It was horrible. Now, I want to it's really important for me to say, this is not divine retribution. This is not a punishment coming down to the bad people. I would never say that. I have many, many dear friends in Texas. If anything, Texas and Israel were both the Lone Star State. We have a lot in common. There are so many lovers of Zion in Texas. And I was told by my dear friend Bob Odell, who's a Christian in Texas and who also suffered through this. He said, well, God speaks first to the people who will listen. And he speaks clearly, but gently. And after that, if that message that goes to the people he loves is not listened to, then things are going to get serious. And I think that's what we're going through right now, is that polar vortex hit directly as a result of Biden's actions and intentions towards Israel. This was the gentle warning that came before. That being said, okay. So Biden's Middle East policies, his policies towards Israel, if he continues with them, it's probably not going to go well. If you'd like, I'm going to put up the links when this is going to go up on the Israel 365 News YouTube channel, and I'll put up the links to all these articles, and hopefully also on the Facebook page. The list of natural disasters is really, really shocking. It's almost one-to-one. There was this in 2000, for example, in 2016, there was a Paris summit where they were going to say, okay, Israel, if you don't accept the two-state solution we're offering you, we're going to create a Palestinian state without you. I don't know how they can think, they can just take land away from any country, especially something in the Bible. And while they were talking about it, it started to rain. And over the next 24 hours, the River Seine, in Paris, where the conference was being held, rose 20 feet. It was the worst flooding Paris had seen in decades. And for those of you who are more political, I just want to point out something about what the two-state solution is. The two-state solution, it's actually, they're trying to say something really horrible in nice terms. Even in biblical terms, it's bad. You want to take land away, the biblical heartland where most of the Bible took place, Judea and Samaria. But we saw what do they really have in mind? If you look at Gaza, it's ethnically cleansed. Hi, Robert. I guess you don't agree with me. Okay. I'm sorry. They want to ethnically cleanse Judea and Samaria, just like they did Gaza. They want to take out all the Jews. They want to also take out, if you look at Gaza, there are very, very few Christians. In the Palestinian Authority, you have places like Bethlehem, which used to be majority Christian cities, are no longer. The Christians are horribly persecuted, openly persecuted, with their property taken away from them. And we see that the sites that are the religious sites that are controlled by the Palestinians, there's no religious freedom. We see that on the Temple Mount, as opposed to the sites that are under Israeli control. I have prayed at the Western Wall right next to Muslims. They put down their prayer mats. There's no problem. Right next to Christians. I've had some beautiful experiences like that. So if you want religious freedom, that's where it's going. So the two-state solution actually is, hi, Carol. The two-state solution is actually ethnically cleansing Judea and Samaria of all Jews. Just like Gaza is ethnically cleansed, they want to ethnically cleanse Judea and Samaria of all Jews, take away all rights. If Gaza is the precedent, it's going to become a base of terror. It's not a good place for Jews. It's not a good place for Arabs, and it's not a good place for Christians. The Arabs are suffering in Gaza. I feel sorry for it. I feel sorry for them. I would like them to thrive and flourish and live a good life. Unfortunately, they are now citizens of the Palestinian Authority. Jews in Israel vote. Jews in the Palestinian Authority do not. Why? Because the Palestinian Authority doesn't have elections. So that's an unfortunate reality. The Palestinians who live in Israel, they have the third largest political party. They serve in take part in every aspect of Israeli life. One of the horrible lies is apartheid. There is no apartheid in Israel. The only apartheid is that Jews are not allowed to go into Arab cities. That's under threat of death. There are big red signs outside of the Palestinian city that say no Jews can enter It's illegal. You can get arrested, and your life is in danger. Hi, Fisher. Hi, Carol. Fisherman, you're totally right. There's an everlasting covenant, and we saw that it's everlasting. The Jews were gone for 2,000 years, and it wasn't because the covenant disappeared. The covenant is back. Robert Almaraz, I'd suggest you look again. If you want to contact me, my email is eliyahu at Israel365.com. You can contact me on Facebook, Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz. There is no apartheid. If you define apartheid and you tell me how that applies to Israel, I'll be open to hear that. I just know what apartheid is. I live in Israel, and there is no apartheid here. If anything, the Arabs inside Israel are treated. They have 100% rights. They're treated very well. They thrive. And if you say that Israel is oppressing the occupied territories, Judea and Samaria, that's clearly not true, because they are under Palestinian Authority rule. That began with Oslo. They don't vote because the Palestinian Authority doesn't have elections. Their laws, they cannot sell their land to Jews under penalty of death. That's a right to have my property and sell it. And the Arabs, the Palestinians, do not have that right under the Palestinian Authority. Okay, let's see. Pray for us in America. Yep, we'll be praying for you. Bless us, we'll bless you back. Okay. You know something? If it's Trump or if it's someone else, the main thing is, I think Trump, he went up against everyone. All of the media was against him. All of the media. They pulled every dirty trick in the book. They spied on him. They wiretapped him, and he just kept swinging. And I think Trump got this strength to stand up against everyone because he tapped into Jerusalem. He was directly connected to Jerusalem. If I'm not mistaken, he was the first sitting president to visit the Western Wall. He prayed there. His Jewish daughter prayed there. We have a joke in Israel. It's sad but true. What's the difference between Donald Trump and liberal American Jews? Donald Trump has Jewish grandchildren. Donald Trump, any attempt to put space between him and the Jewish people is clearly wrong. He has Jewish family. He's about as open-minded as you come. Biden's actions are driving the Saudis to increase ties with Israel. I think the Saudis they're smart. And if you look, I'll tell you what it's about. Okay, if you look at a map, all of the Gulf Arab states, all of their oil in super tankers has to go out through the Strait of Turan, the Strait of now it's Hormuz, I think it is. I'm blanking out. I'm sorry. And it's 2.5 miles across. And the other side is Iran. So all of the Gulf Arab states, their oil is threatened by Iranian dominance of the Straits of Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz. Let me just double check that I'm not losing my mind there. Strait of Hormuz. Yes, the Strait of Hormuz. It's actually very narrow. I suggest you look at a map. It'll make everything very clear. And Iran has tried to shut it down. America is very strong at keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. I think it's 70% of all of the world's oil that's imported to other countries goes through the Strait of Hormuz. And America is very strong about keeping that open. And Iran, that's their big threat to the Gulf states. In addition to the religious divide, that's a big problem. And one of the things that's already happening from the Abraham Accords is they're building a pipeline through Saudi Arabia from the Gulf to Israel, to Eilat. Now, people don't know this, but I think in the 70s, they built a pipeline from Eilat to Haifa and Yaffo. Why? Because at the time, Israel was the conduit for Iranian oil to get to Europe. The problem is the Suez Canal is not wide enough for modern ships. The Suez Canal was built over 100 years ago. Ships were much smaller. They certainly didn't have super tankers. And it's very expensive to go through, really expensive. And it costs a lot, adds a lot to the price of oil. So they want to have this pipeline bring oil directly from the Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia, including Bahrain and the UAE, bring it directly to Eilat, pipe it up to Yaffo and Haifa, where super tankers can pick it up and take it to Europe. It'll save them a ton of money because they don't have to go through the Suez Canal, and it will ensure it because it doesn't have to go through the Strait of Hormuz where it's threatened by Iran. So the Saudis are just smart. They're not as dumb as you would think. And they're very cultured, and this is to their benefit, and they know it. And they also know that even though they get the same advanced weaponry, if things get a little sticky, they can count on Israel to fly the F-35s and take out Iran. Wow, this is going on longer than I thought. It looks like people are still interested. Yeah, Fisher, you guys went 109 hours without power and sub-freezing temperatures. I was davening so hard for you guys. The storm was named Uriel. You got to watch those angelic storms. Okay. Yeah, the two-stage solution aims to divide the... Oh, we had that, sure. Okay, are there any other... Okay, Robert, you say you can't marry religion and state. It's dangerous, and you all pushed out Palestinians. We didn't put out... Well, okay, I'll give you that. There is what to say about that. Your apartheid statement is totally anti-factual. This we can talk about. Religion and state. If you've been to Israel, you know that if Israel is anything, it's multicultural. It has total freedom of religion, more than you would imagine. And if you are concerned about marrying religion and state, well, Hamas is most explicitly religious, and the Palestinian Authority is most explicitly religious. The Palestinian Authority is slightly less so, but Hamas, if you read their covenant, they're explicitly representatives of Islam. Okay. Nitzayamina Emmanuel, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. I apologize. I'm getting tired. It's been a long day. The two-state solution will be achieved. Unfortunately, Biden will not be able to break the deal, but EU under Rome, the Pope himself. What you're saying is probably logical. However, I have a lot of faith that the two-state solution, there's no way it's going to come through. The most dangerous form of thought today is secular humanism. Oh, yeah. It is actually, okay, let me finish reading. The secular humanism, as I see it, is a worldwide system of thought, which today is a global destroying force. This force has come and gone back and forth since the beginning of time, and the end result has always resulted in a kind of civilization collapse. I want to suggest that this secular humanism, which you're talking about, is actually the whole Gaia. It's actually a form of idolatry, self-worship. And I think it has been around since the beginning of time as idolatry, in which case we see that the Bible, that's why they hate the Bible so much. You would think you could be a secular humanist and still accept the Bible. I don't think that's true, because it is idolatry. The political left in Israel were usher in that deal in exchange to build the temple. Well, I'm all for building the temple. It has to be a house of prayer for all nations. I'm really looking forward to that. I have a lot of friends from other nations. I'd love to see them there. The human mind as the highest form of intellect. John Kenneth Stava. Human as God, in other words. Exactly. Exactly. That is exactly what I intended. You said it better. That is how human secularism becomes idolatry. The person replacing the Godhead. Yeah, Carol, you've seen it before. I'd suggest I'll put up the link. If you see, we're talking 25, 30 incidents, mileposts in the Land for Peace dealings. Just the correlation, you just can't deny it. I'm sorry, and I hear people try to say it, but I'm like, but okay, if you were running science experiments and you have that kind of correlation, correlation does not prove causation, but it is a correlation. Okay, speech creates, and every time we use it, yes. And every time we use their terminology, we give power to them. Every time we refer to the Arabs as Palestinians, we give power to them and their agenda. It's also inaccurate. Also, as a person who writes news articles, there are things that are said in the media that are absolutely inaccurate, and they're perpetuated over and over again. People who say that the Temple Mount is the third holiest site in Islam, that's entirely inaccurate. There's a whole big story about that. Maybe one day I'll be able to bring Dr. Mordechai Kedar on. It disrespects Sunni Muslims. It disrespects Shia Muslims. It's really a political agenda and has very little to do with Islam. Okay. Okay. You disenfranchise the Palestinians. You care about the impoverished. Being impoverished does not mean that you're morally correct. And being impoverished does not justify bad actions. Okay. And it also does not mean, just because one guy's rich and another guy's poor, does not mean that the poor man has rights to the rich man's property. That's also anti-Bible. The Bible says don't steal. Okay. Historically, the Jews always lived here. Okay. So I also care about the impoverished, and I care about the Palestinians. They have gotten billions and billions of dollars through UNRWA, through the EU. They use it for terror. There was as much money given to Gaza as there was used to build Abu Dhabi. Okay. They could have built themselves a paradise. They chose to engage in war. Yeah, I don't know. Intifada it's their term. I'm not sure. I don't know enough about the term intifada. I don't know what it is. Hi, Ruben from Brazil. Yeah, that's interesting. Mike, buddy. God bless you. Michael and I go way back. We went to yeshiva together. Speech creates. The voice is the voice of Jacob. The hands are the hands of Esav. The universe also, right? The universe was created by speech, and our speech is the speech of God, which is why we say blessings. So we do have to be very careful about how we speak about these issues. We should be accurate. There is a problem with the term Palestinian. There's a problem. For example, the Bedouins never wanted to be called Palestinian, and now they want to, because it's a lot of money. Right, Robert. As I said, correlation is not causation, but if there's enough correlation, it would be foolish not to pay attention. And I invite you to look at the article to see how many events correlate, and to take a look at it. Also, I want to make it very clear, Robert, if we're going to engage in dialogue, I do not have an ounce of hatred in my heart for Palestinians or Arabs. My wife was the victim of a terror attack when she was pregnant. She was attacked by an Arab with a knife, and through a miracle was saved. I do not have an ounce of hatred. I would love to see real coexistence. The Palestinian Authority and Hamas work against coexistence. They call it normalization, and they are very strongly anti-normalization. That's very difficult. You can't make peace with someone that you don't want to live with. Will sacrifices be initiated? That's actually a big dispute amongst rabbis. It's not so clear that there will be animal sacrifices. I've actually attended animal sacrifices. It is a transformative, powerful experience. I would, if there would be regular sacrifices, I would be terrified. It's a spiritual trauma. The reason why you bring a sin offering is after the sin offering, you're not going to want to sin again. It's a really transformative experience. There is a dispute amongst the rabbis as to whether or not there will be sacrifices. There will certainly be the bringing of the first fruits. There will certainly be the grain offerings and the other non-animal offerings. And most of the animal sacrifices we eat, at least partially. But for example, the Passover offering is entirely eaten. So rather than get my meat from the butcher, I'll get it from the temple. The Muslims also have sacrifices. The Samaritans also have sacrifices. It's not unique to Judaism. It's a dispute. It's not clear. Okay, forgive my ignorance. Oh no, I love your ignorance. I love your wisdom. I love everything about you. But I would like to know the deep agenda in trying to make Israel give land to Palestine. Don't know. I don't know. It's counterlogical. And to be honest, at the time that it was set up by the Israeli government, it was set up with people who did not have the Palestinian people's best interest at heart. Yeah. Robert, it sounds like you and I can have a dialogue. I'm really excited, even though we don't agree. And I mean, I love having dialogues with people I don't agree with. That's how I learn. I find out where I'm wrong. There's no hate. Unfortunately, so many people who say they're pro-Palestinian are really just straight up anti-Israel. They don't bring a lot of the humanitarian organizations in Israel. They will work. They'll point out alleged humanitarian violations by Israel and will absolutely suppress any humanitarian violations by the Palestinians against their own people. Like I said, if Palestinians have been tortured and killed for selling lands to Jews, so if the Palestinians in Israel, like I said, the Palestinians inside Israel have voted 3 times in the last 2 years, and they're about to vote the 4th time for their party. And the Palestinians in the Palestinian Authority, under the Palestinian Authority rule, haven't voted in 17 years. How long has it been? Yeah. Okay, we're going to wrap this up soon. I just want to say goodbye to people. I wear a Star David to respect the Jewish people. Is this disrespectful to God or the Jewish people? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm a Christian. I wear a cross. I got to tell you something. I was raised, it used to be uncomfortable. I'd see Christians with a cross. It accentuated the differences and the difficult history. And it was difficult for me. But as I've become more attached to the prophecy of a house of prayer for all nations, I noticed that, like, what's her name? Laura Engel, the woman who was Trump's press secretary, they wear crosses. And I actually like it. It now, I think it says more about what we have in common. We share the Bible. We share the same Bible. We read it a little differently, and we have other differences, of course. But those differences, I don't think they cancel out the potential for coming together. I now see a cross as, I'm like, oh, that person shares a lot of values with me. God bless them. That's great. So we have to end up here. I'd like to thank you all for joining me. This went on a lot longer. I'm planning on doing a news update twice a week. We're still working on that schedule. And the other days we're going to be doing our interviews, which seem to have been going very well. I've spoken to some amazing people that I really like. And that's what I like doing. I like to to have talks with people. Please send your comments. Watch the videos, share it. We're trying to get this thing off the ground. Yeah, Alex. Okay. I wear them as a necklace. Great. Okay. Yeah. And yep. Okay. I'd like to thank you all, and thank you for joining me. And if you bless me or bless us in Israel, we got no choice. We got to bless you back. That's the way it rules. That's the way it's works. That's the way it's written. Thank you so much. Be blessed. Have an amazing day.